Hello and welcome to the 17th episode of Dystopedia. I'm your host Matt Davidson and I'm once again joined by my colleague Andrew Hodgson.
How are you, Matt?
Yeah, pretty well, Andrew. How about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good.
You been up to much this week?
Mate, that on the road this week, the road trip I was meant to go on last week that I was all happy about, got pushed to this week, and I fucking wish I went on it last week. You never win with this shit.
Yeah, you think, that's tomorrow's problem now. Yeah, then when it comes around, you're like, oh, God. Like that South Park episode. That's 5 years from now.
Pretty much. Yeah. Fucking South Park references early, mate.
Oh, you got to get them in early when you can, right?
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, I've obviously, like I said last week, I finished the TV series From, then went down, I watched something I swore I'd never watched, but I went for a bit of Disney Star Wars, so I got back into Andor Season 2. I got to give them credit, it is amazing, not going to lie.
That's the problem with Disney, isn't it?
Yeah, they lure you in.
Well, they got us fucking all hopeful, didn't they? When they, that first, what was the first one they did?
Oh, The Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens.
Look, it wasn't terrible, but
it was safe.
It was safe,
and I can understand why they got on side. And then Rogue One came out, and honestly, I put Rogue One right up there as like, I mean, look, it doesn't beat The Empire Strikes Back in my opinion.
You're just underneath it, yeah.
Yeah, but just as a film, it doesn't even have to be Star Wars.
Well, if you liked Rogue One, episodes 7, 8, 9 of Andor Season 2 is just
incredible. Man, I like the first season.
I don't want to give too much away, but you're seeing the Empire at its best in like. Because it's always been kind of a joke where the stormtroopers can't shoot, and they're incompetent and they're useless. But in this one, they're so like they're really sophisticated and manipulative, and
So why aren't they in the other movies then?
Yeah, no, it's like that. But episode 8, when it all unfolds, you're just like, holy shit, this is really good TV. Like this is like one of the best shows that come out in the last couple of years. Like it's unbelievable.
Fucking Disney.
Yeah, no. yeah. We have to keep giving them bloody money now, don't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well, I guess on last couple of weeks, we've been doing the 28 days and then the 28 weeks later, and we're going a bit different path this episode. We're going to the War Game, which came out in 1966, I believe.
1966, the same year as England won the World Cup.
There you go.
The one and only time, yeah.
Yeah. Happy memories, right? The one that you guys keep singing about, yeah?
Yeah. We don't talk about our history. What are you on about?
Yeah. Well, so before we get into it, I think we should do a bit of the backstory, a bit about the director himself, because doing a bit of research into Peter Watkins, he's a very fascinating guy, isn't he?
He is. Some of his views and the way he views media and everything, and a few of the other movies, very interesting.
It got me thinking about when we did RoboCop about the media manipulation and glamorizing and not like stating the facts in certain degrees and stuff, where he was kind of like saying stuff like 20 years before that. Yeah,
it very much reminded me of that passage you read out of that book.
Amusing ourselves to death. Yeah,
it very much reminded me of that.
Yeah, definitely.
There's this sort of like media theory side of things. I've never thought of it like that, but I guess because the media being the way it is right now, it's all we've kind of ever known. You know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's interesting.
Well, he's kind of like they've described him as like the godfather of the docudrama form, right? So it was his first breakout film was called was it Culloden, isn't it?
Culloden. Yeah. I saw that. I watched a little bit of it. It's interesting. Have you seen the?
I've seen some flashes of it. Like it's like if the battle happened in like 18 something,
1746. I think it was a Scottish uprising, and the British put it down. The British forces put it down, but it kind of filmed it as if it was like
it was happening like at the time. Yeah.
So I think he was looking at like Vietnam War broadcasts, because I think when you look back at like the Vietnam War reporting and stuff at the time, I guess it was the first TV war, and it would have been really. Would have been odd for people, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think, was it 1964? So I think the war kicked off in 1965, 1966, when it really took
Well, I think when America joined. But I think they were still reporting on it before.
Yeah, that's true, actually, yeah.
And it was sort of, I mean, look, America were involved, but not at full scale, right?
Yeah, they weren't, full armada or anything.
Yeah. The Tonkin incident hadn't happened yet, Just straight at Tonkin,
Yeah, what a coincidence that was.
Yeah, that's oh God, they shouldn't have attacked them,
Yeah. They left them no choice.
They had to go in. Yeah. But I think it's interesting, right? Like just that style of showing a battle from what's the 18th century filmed like it was on the news today. It's just to think of that at the time. That's genius.
Very, very ahead of his time, because it's a very unique documentary style. It's like filmmaking style, right? Yeah. It would have been very jarring, I guess, for people at the time to see something like that. So be forgiven, like even like me watching the War Game. Yeah, at times you're thinking, is this actually like archived war footage, or this real, like it kind of blurs the line?
And I think that's by design. I think.
Yeah, so, of course it is. Yeah. But even like 60 years on, it's still relevant, or still like makes me question it. And when how much look how far film has come since then. So like he's very good like director in that way, isn't he?
He is. Yeah.
I think too. Like, so I was just reading about before him too. He was born in 1935, and yeah, he obviously then would have been growing up under the blitz of the German onslaught of the Battle of Britain, and I think he during that time too he moved around a lot, which I mean a lot of people around that time would have. So studied acting and directing at the Royal Academy of the Dramatic Arts in England. So you can see probably that's where he got his groundwork, and he got the runs on the board basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then eventually, he started doing a bit of like producing stuff, doing a bit of short films and commercials in the early '60s, and
I think this is when he started working for the BBC, didn't he?
yeah. It won't be for long, will it? Yeah.
And I guess this is where, I guess we've already mentioned Culloden, but this is where the war game enters into it, right? I guess they were commissioned to make a docudrama, and they wanted to depict the horrifying aftermath of a Soviet nuclear strike. And I mean, you take your hat off to them. You couldn't have shown that in a more real way, and I think that was the problem, right?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
was too real.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely. So, and then as we said just before, like it's no one had seen any of that kind of style of filmmaking like that as well. So it would have been really jarring. I think I was reading too that they were worried about a similar kind of event with the Orson Welles, the War of the Worlds kind of broadcast. I remember people in America thought it was actual real invasion because imagine if you turned on your TV and was halfway through the documentary halfway through the film watching it, you would be forgiven. Like you could forgive the people for believing it was like kind of something real or something was got like ongoing. So you can see why those fears were there.
Yeah, and this is like, I mean, we're talking about the government. When they say, we talk about the ban, which is, I guess you talk about the Streisand effect, don't you? In previous episodes. But, officially the BBC claimed it was like too horrifying for the medium of television. I think I mentioned last week, because the one thing I'd heard about this movie is, I think the Wilson government was really worried about, suicide rates are going to go off if people watch this. You could kind of understand that at the time. But I think the cynic in me, and then there's declassified documents that have come out now that they basically pressured the BBC to pull it.
Yeah.
They feared exactly what you said. It would spark panic and the Orson Welles thing, but it would undermine the sort of public confidence in Britain's policy of nuclear deterrence, which was basically their policy at this time. Yeah,
and I think the election was around the corner too, and the BBC recently had expanded from BBC One to BBC Two as well, so they took on more debt, more monetary stuff like that. And it was not it was at a time where the government could really pressure them, like indirectly, by saying, "Oh, you can broadcast it, but it could go this way or that way if you do that."
Interesting, yeah. I've read some internal memos actually reveal that BBC executives they were really concerned about damaging political relationships with other people during the Cold War. But equally, like, you have to look at the time, and I think it's interesting in terms of what Britain was like at the time in terms of their like defense policy, because I guess they put a lot of eggs in the basket of Britain kind of accepted that it could no longer be the world's policeman. I guess the Second World War had really the end of their empire had really put an end to that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then I guess to add insult to injury, there was the 1956 the Suez Canal incident where Egypt kind of nationalized it, took it back from them, and like all of Britain's trade basically went through the Suez Canal, where they staged like a fake invasion. So France, Israel, and England all colluded. Israel invaded from the east, and then England decided to jump in as like, we'll be the peacemaker, peace broker, and Eisenhower found out about it. He's like, what the fuck are you doing? And they had to like retreat with the tail between their legs because they could see right through it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was at this point when it was like, yeah, fuck, we're done.
Yeah. It's like, the glory days are really over now.
We kind of need, and everything, I guess, their whole policy, England's policy is all about, and has been ever since, is just keeping America interested in Europe. This opens up to like NATO defense putting the Americans putting nukes on English bases and things like that. But I guess for the people to accept that, they had to believe in the idea of nuclear deterrence, and there's a general belief at the time. I think people really thought you could survive a nuclear war. They governments actually promoted the myth really of it by being silent.
Yeah.
You had sort of civil defense policies, and I think if you heard of the birth of like the civil defense campaigns where they'd formed in 1948, it was like a volunteer force. It was largely made up of like older civilians or people who had fought in the Second World War. It was a bit Dad's Army.
Yeah.
And showing, we can. They're doing shows up and down the country of ladders, and this is how we'll save people, and this is the food you'll eat in a nuclear war. And it was very like a war behind, which fucking England always are a war behind, but generally history shows that they find a way to stay in it. You don't get that chance in a nuclear war. You're done.
Oh, no.
So I think I think there was a lot of worry hence the banning. I think there was a lot of worry from the British government that or fuck, the whole nuclear deterrence policy, people are going to actually see that you cannot win a nuclear war, and they're worried about the backlash. So,
yeah. I think it was that famous pamphlet that came out, was it 1957, the hydrogen bomb? I think that was where it came from the UK Central Office of Information, and it was like, yes, like civil defence information booklet for and it went out to the general public, but then it wasn't widely available. People didn't really see it. I think you had to pay for it as well, something like
9
that.
pence.
Yeah, and that was as parodied in the upcoming film we're to talk about. Yeah, so
well, I think the idea of it is the pamphlet was meant to be handed out like when nuclear war was imminent, so that you'd be how the hell you would know that? I guess if tensions were rising, you'd have civil defense volunteers walking around and distributing the pamphlet like 3 days before nuclear defense. Oh, you barricade your home, buy sandbags and buy bits of 4x2 wood to do this. I mean, what you assuming everyone's going to be panic buying and there's going to be supplies and the prices and how many people can actually afford it? It's.
Yeah, I'll quickly read some of the key elements of this, the hydrogen bomb one that came out in 1957. So it basically said, explain what the hydrogen bomb was, the effects of the nuclear explosion. The heat intenses a firestorm and burns, and then the blast, it destructs buildings and flying debris and the radiation and the shock waves. And it says here, what would you do in an attack? Oh, you've got to take cover immediately upon the warning, shield yourself from the heat and debris, stay indoors to avoid fallout. It was very, store food, water, and essential supplies. And then, instructions for basic first aid and sanitation. So just, it'd be like any kind of an attack that happened. It'd be like the Battle of Britain, right? Same kind of measurements.
Well, yeah. Well, that was the problem with it. They were almost preparing for the Blitz and the Second World War.
It's just, yes.
And it's you're complete. I think it was Clement Attlee who actually said government at the time. He was talking about them and the Civil Defense Corps, and he said civil defense in the nuclear age is futile. What are we doing? Why are we spending money on this? There is no point. But they didn't like that, So. Yeah,
exactly. And then the whole point of this pamphlet too was to kind of be optimistic in tone and suggesting, that's very likely you'll survive a nuclear apocalypse. Because we shouldn't. Obviously there'll be deaths and stuff, but we can persevere through it. It's like, yeah, sure, mate.
Yeah, the old British spirit. Yeah, it's like it does take into consideration a few things, mate. The absolute power. I mean, a hydrogen bomb was probably about 50 Hiroshimas. I don't know how anyone's withstanding that,
Yeah, no, exactly. Well,
look what Hiroshima did.
Well, by this point, the Hiroshima was a tactical nuke as opposed to
one megaton. Yeah, it was a tactical nuke. Yeah.
That's what's just oh, come on, it's absolute joke.
Yeah, and I think even at this point, nuclear winter wasn't even a thing. I think that was around the time Threads came out. I think in the mid '80s, it wasn't even a concept at this point. So it's just that adds something. That adds another layer to it,
Yeah, and I assume too that because obviously the only nuclear bomb being dropped was on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Where no one really has any first-hand experience with it besides people testing it out in the Bikini Atoll and wherever Russia did it out near the Finland, wasn't up in the top of the
when they dropped the
Tsar bomb,
bomber, yeah.
And that was kind of the only. It was only government officials that really had the idea of the magnitude of it. I mean, you probably heard it on the grapevine, but obviously back then it was a lot easier for governments to tightly control things. Things didn't leak out as much as they would do today, and now with social media and stuff, you'd be able to see it left, right, and center, right? Compared to back then.
Oh yeah.
So secrets were definitely more underplayed then. So I guess too, another important thing to talk about is probably Britain's culture at the time, right? So in the 1960s, you're seeing massive cultural shift and change. The baby boom generations, they've grown up post-war. They're considered, rebellious against the grain. They don't want to follow the old school. They want to make their way in the world and make their mark in the world. And you're seeing the rise of the British pop groups like the Rolling Stones and obviously the Beatles as well. Very progressive reforms were going through too. So we saw a lot of the legalization of homosexuality, abortions. I think the pill became a big thing too, with women's liberation. Yeah, also the decline of deference. So traditional respect for authority in church and monarchy was a lot of the young people were kind of turning their nose to it a bit and questioning it and wanting to explore beyond the parameters of the establishment in a way, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and hence I guess this all buys into the fact that the BBC probably all went into that thinking of banning this, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think as you said earlier too, with America were popping nuclear warheads on the British mainland too, so then that drew in people's ire and all. They got angry about that, were protesting it, and then we're seeing the rise of the peace movement and the hippies and things like that. So
I think this was I think it was founded in 1958. Was a campaign for nuclear disarmament, so the CND. yeah, it was actually in response to British nuclear tests. Actually, Britain actually tested a lot of nuclear weapons here in South Australia.
Yeah,
a lot of them in the 50s. But then US missiles on British bases became kind of the final straw. So they, at their height, they had about 200,000 people at a rally in Aldermaston and like a Hyde Park rally. Yeah, I guess there was a big concern on the losses of sovereignty and the fact that Britain could be targeted due to like US weapons beyond British control. We've got generals like Curtis LeMay at the time, who was pretty much America's Bomber Harris.
Oh yeah.
I guess we'll talk about Bomber Harris a little bit later. You know?
Yeah, comes into it. Yeah.
But this like the C&D. I mean, they advocated for like unilateral disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation. So they kind of wanted, in other words, they just wanted all nuclear weapons stopped. And I think I've kind of struggled with that idea, that it's a little bit idyllic for me. You know, when you see this, like, what do you really think that, like I get that people want world peace, like, as if you wouldn't, but once nuclear weapons exist, how is, like, getting rid of them a reality? Because, like, it's not like you can unlearn what you've learned, and then there's a massive power vacuum that someone's going to take advantage of. It's just, like, it's quite wishful thinking.
Well, it's the ultimate equalizer, a nuclear weapon, isn't it? So, and it can put, not say third world countries, but countries with not that much economic and military power to, I've developed my own nuclear arsenal now. I'm a big boy at the table now. I can negotiate. We see with North Korea, right?
I guess that's the worry right now with Iran. I mean, how long before they've got one?
I think they do, don't they, Iran?
I think they're working on it. Very likely within the next year or so they will. They'll be joining the table. So.
Yeah, so they'll have their piece of the pie. Yeah, it's a bit freaky, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I just feel like what these guys are fighting for. It's just like it's. I don't want to sound like I kind of know better, but I don't understand how that could have been a serious belief at the time that everybody would have just stopped and lay down our weapons. Like it's not realistic. Like, I mean, I can understand in terms of like wanting to like avoid, maybe reduce stockpiles or maybe take weapons off like hair trigger alert.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Like,
I guess, because you're never going to get zero nuclear weapons. It's impossible.
But if you reduce stockpiles.
Sorry, just on that, I think the fact that if you've got less weapons around, there's less likely one's going to go off by mistake, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? But I think even pulling back from like hair trigger alert, I mean, I guess if people don't know what hair trigger alert means, it kind of means like that your weapons are kind of like minutes from launch, and that's a kind of a hangover from the Cold War days when it was like use it or lose it, where being on hair trigger alert means it's sort of like a button away. Essentially, you can hit the button and you could essentially fire on warning, because the way things are now, I mean, they could come and hit you, and if it's firing from a submarine, you've probably got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
If they're firing from somewhere, Russia or the Soviet Union to America, you've got, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes.
No, yeah,
sort of thing. So, I mean, this is the scary thing and the shit that keeps me up at night, in the sense that I think there's about 1,800 missiles between the US and the Soviet, and Russia these days, pointing at one another on hair trigger alert. I mean, conceivably, we've seen how many near misses have been in the past. Conceivably, the president could be woken up at fucking 4 a.m. and say, "Look, you've got 5 minutes to make a call here." That's the fucking scary thing, and we should not be there. And I understand advocating against that, right? But it's I don't know. I don't want to scare everyone, but that's the fucking.
Well, it's funny watching this. Then obviously, Freds as well. There's no real modern day version of this kind of filmmaking or messages there. It's kind of forgotten about.
That's the thing. That's why this is still so relevant today, in that sense that we are closer now. There are more. Back in these days, in the mid-60s, there was 2 real nuclear powers, right? All right, Britain had a couple of.
I think France did as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, but relatively speaking, I mean, and Britain had a few submarines, and they had the Blue Steel missile situated in Scotland, I believe, which pissed them off.
Yeah.
But really, the bulk of it was the US and the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So they kind of like there's an element of control, but as we'll get into in a bit, there's a fucking hell of a lot of near misses. But now, what have we got? Like 12 countries that have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, it just takes one maniac to push the button, doesn't it?
We are genuinely closer now than we were then. But it's almost like, I guess it's just easy to put your head in the sand now, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
I just don't want to think about it.
I think too, because obviously back then it was more likely it was going to happen. Like in the people's consciousness, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis, people thought, it's only a matter of time before it happens, right? It's going to eventually come to a forefront. Where I think because people thought, oh no, the Cold War's over now, we won, the West won, it's not really an issue anymore. It's like, well, no, it still lingers.
It's human nature to think that, right? Like as we've spoken about before, if there's something right in front of you, we can react, but it is human nature to just sort of forget. And just try and move on, you know?
Yeah, also like we said I think in a couple of episodes ago, I think the RoboCop one was talking about how, you know, Orwell's vision of what the world could be under Big Brother control, as opposed to what Huxley went down that way. So most people feared what Orwell prophesized, and then actually Huxley's one's more realistic to what actually happened. So like it's one of those things like the ultimate scary thing would be nuclear annihilation, right? Because it hasn't happened, and we can kind of think, oh, that, you know, people just fear mongering, you know, it won't happen. It's like, well, you never know. Like, just can, and the scary thing is you'll never know if it does happen, because you'll be you might get like a 3-minute warning, or you'll be totally obliterated, and then we won't know whose fault it was or why it was caused. It will just happen.
You know what is really interesting when we talk about that. If you look at some of the near misses leading up to this film, it kind of segues that nicely into this. So leading up to this film in 1966. So in 1956, there was a US radar station in Greenland that mistook a rising moon for a Soviet missile. So Strategic Air Command went on alert before basically the error was caught. In 1960, a NORAD misread a Soviet satellite launch as an incoming ICBM. Forces briefly escalated to high alert. This is a weird one. So in 1961, there's a Goldsboro B-52 crash. So a US bomber carrying 2 hydrogen bombs broke apart over North Carolina. One of these bombs actually, so 2 bombs dropped to the ground. One of these bombs came within us. So there's 5 out of 6 switches to activate it. 5 were done, and one, it was one actual switch away from detonation. The other one dropped into a swamp, and to this day remains buried. They've never found it, so God knows I don't know. It's in a swamp somewhere.
And some alligator bloody triggers it.
That's the fear. I mean, obviously, you've spoken about the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is the one that the world saw. So arguably, I guess it's the closest we've ever seen that we've come to it. You know what I mean? But a lot of people don't know of... there were several incidents, but I think the one notably we've spoken about before is Vasily Arkhipov, the political officer in the submarine that refused to actually... Because it went silent. I think they were at sea for days, and the US were dropping depth charges, and the radio went out. And for days, they were sitting there without any contact from Moscow. And they thought nuclear war had begun, so that whole Soviet thinking was use it or lose it. 2 of them said yes, but I think the whole orders that 3 had to say yes. And Vasily Arkhipov was the one who said no. If he
said yeah,
if he hit that button, the chances of it happening by mistake. There's one I was looking into too. There was actually in 1962, around the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a US base in Minnesota, so they were all on high alert. A grizzly bear actually got in there, and I think there was a guard that actually thought, I guess the fear in the US at the time was like, oh, there'd be agents or Soviet agents that would get in and infiltrate these bases. And that was sabotage. So it sounded an alarm, but all the bases around that area had gone off. Like 60 alarms had gone off. At one base, the alarm actually, it went up to it was like a false alert. So he had actually sounded the alarm for an intruder, but this one had a false alert that it was happening. It was time to attack, and like all the base scrambled nuclear armed aircraft. And I think it had got to the end of the runway, and the base command said, no, false alarm. Like a fucking grizzly bear actually almost set off World War III, and nobody would have known about it.
Yeah.
That's the way. It's
Yogi Bear, was it?
It's crazy. It just shows you, like, we try and put all our faith in these systems. Kind of when we're speaking about the machine stops, we put all our faith. I think they're all sophisticated. Fucking one little mistake, and everyone's on high alert. And that whole mentality of use it or lose it. It's the dangerous thing about hair trigger alert. You know, there's another one. In 1966 over Spain, Palomares is a B-52 crash. This is the one that they make fun of in Doctor Strangelove. What do they call Operation Chrome Dome? You know, when they had I think they had 12 different aircraft. They're all circling, and they'd have predetermined targets. Yeah. So that was kind of that was like the US policy at the time. So around in the mid '60s, where they were kind of circling. So this is Doctor Strangelove when the order accidentally goes through. It used to take, so they were on 24/7 circling these areas, and they'd all sort of circle on. Just on the edge of Soviet airspace, just in case they got their orders to go through. They had to be refueled twice. So like one of the refueling aircraft would come up and refuel while they're flying. They actually collided. And people died, like so many people died in the actual fireball, like everyone died. But 4 hydrogen bombs dropped to the ground over Spain. One landed in the Mediterranean, and actually, so 3 were like recovered immediately. 1 landed in the Mediterranean and took just months to recover. There's a massive fight between the US and Spain. I actually think there was only compensation paid in like the mid-90s or something like that. It went on for years.
Oh, wow, yeah, you can imagine.
I don't know if Peter Watkins would have known about this at the time, but we were so close on so many occasions.
No, you didn't. Well, I think the reason why he made this film was because there wasn't enough talk about it. He was kind of like saying like, no, this is something that needs to be like, you know, at the forefront of people's minds. And just another reason why I think I heard that got banned as well is because the government too was worried that because there was so much little funding towards the home front and, you know, rearming or like, you know, preparing for it, that this would bring it to the forefront, and then more budget would have to go towards putting out, you know, civil defense stuff. And then they're kind of like, well, no, we don't want more money going. We actually would rather cut it because we need money to go elsewhere. So like, you can see why these kind of things happen like that, and why they're trying to suppress it. So yeah, Peter Watkins, he seemed like a guy very strong, had core values and beliefs and strong moral compass, right? So it was, when something upset him or something he thought was very important to raise, he would, like, you know, voice it through his, you know, his filmography, wouldn't he? You know?
Yeah, and I can understand it. I know he got very disillusioned and ended up leaving the BBC, and he became very, very
he left England, yeah.
He left England, but I can understand. They've asked him to do something on nuclear war and tell the story of it. It's commissioned drama. He's gone and done it, and he probably couldn't have done it any better, and he's shown it. He's done what a documentary or a mockumentary should do. And then it's been banned, and I guess he'd seen the weakness of the BBC of, like, you know, we're supposed to be some impartial body here, and like true journalism, and why are you suppressing this? Like, why aren't we telling the people what's going on?
Well, I think you said earlier in the episode about the worried about like 20,000 suicides happening because of this, and he thought that was an absolute load of bullshit. Yeah, he raised right through it, and like, I think he had in his resignation letter the day after that. Yeah,
you're worried that the public are going to see the true horror of nuclear war.
Yeah,
and campaign against this,
and how
mutually
like,
assured destruction, basically,
and how like basically the government's got no idea what to do in this situation, and how there's no hope, basically. Yeah, and that you're basically coming like a puppet piece for the government, and that's what he saw it as. And he's like, oh, I'm done with this. I mean, I don't know why he went to America out of all places after, but yeah, I think if he thought the British government were bad in that regard, yeah, I think America was a bit they're a bit more brutal with nuclear weapons and stuff.
Yeah, I guess maybe they were more open and free flowing at the time, right? I don't know. There was, I guess, the movement, the hippie movement, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Possibly kind of the land of free, and there was the American dream was still a thing at the time, I guess. So maybe there's a lot of
I guess they tried to, but then I guess like just after the Kennedy assassination, and then, you know, that's when LBJ just got reelected, and he was really pushing, you know, the Vietnam War stuff. I guess it was more the late 60s, I guess, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think even on Peter Watkins, there was some listening to him about his style. He developed like a real confrontational media style, and he liked to sort of challenge state narratives and expose media complicity. So he actually coined the term, I don't know if you've seen this, but monoform.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting. I've never ever thought about it like this, but he kind of like, he described the mainstream film and television's manipulative editing style. So fast-paced, emotionally prescriptive, intellectually passive.
The whole purpose of 20th century mass audiovisual media is that it is not predicated on incorporating the ideas, feelings, experiences, subjectivity, memory, knowledge, wisdom of the audience or the viewers, and engulfing them and taking them into the process and sharing. And it's simply it's in 20th century mass audiovisual media is designed to withhold those, to push those away, and to instead engulf the people with this fabricated, fragmented, arbitrary process where the person's participation is held out. And that's why everything is moving very fast, to hold back any opportunity for the person to have time to come in and enter the material and challenge it or negotiate with it or anything.
What I took from that, to try to simplify it, like, you know, that whole thing of like sad music equals you got to feel sad, or upbeat music means you feel happy. There's no room for doubt. There's no space for critical thinking. This really upset him because I guess he believed that like real art should provoke and not pacify. So he didn't like films telling you how to think. He liked, and I think we can see that in his work, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you take what you want from it. Like it shouldn't. It is what it is. I'm not going to add any music in here. I'm not going to add any special effects in here to make you think that.
Well, a good example of that is at the end of the film, when he starts playing like Silent Night with, you know, in the destruction of the chaos. That song's obviously very reminiscent of you know, church and Happy Days and Christmas time or something, you know.
Yeah, and I gotta appreciate him for opening up my eyes. I've never really thought of media like that. I never really thought of the film. He thought it was more sort of social control more than anything.
But he's bloody Noam Chomsky before Chomsky, isn't he?
Yeah,
In a way, yeah.
yeah. Well, I guess we've known nothing else, right? Yeah.
Well, the fact is that we're like both you and me never really heard of him before, like going to this episode. Like it just shows that how he's not really recognised or like held up in those high esteem like other directors and people in media, is he?
No,
He's depressed.
And he really should be.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, because then was it after I think in America he got the shits because they were kind of trying to censor him and his movies weren't doing, they got limited release runs and only showed at certain festivals and things like that. And he ended up going to Eastern, or not, it's like the Nordic countries, didn't he? After that, like Sweden. And,
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, Sweden and Germany and.
I wonder where he's still going today. I wonder where
he's
he is
still alive.
now.
Yeah. I think his last film he actually made was in 2000. It's like a French film, I believe. It's called La Commune, and it's about 6 hours apparently.
It's based on
Napoleon or something.
Something. It was about, I think, the French Franco-Prussian War or something of.
Oh yeah, it was based on in 1871 and the defeat of Napoleon III during the Franco-Prussian War. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's done in very much that Culloden style, or Culloden and the War Game style, mockumentary.
It runs for 345 minutes. There you go.
Well, I think he did a 14-hour documentary on nuclear disarmament called The Journey. It's basically a 14-hour essay film about nuclear disarmament over about 9 parts. But yeah, shit, I don't know if we'll maybe we'll review that someday.
Yeah, definitely.
14 hours. Fucking hell.
Oh no, bloody hell! It's like a video game or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think a similar film is called The Fallen. It was a Swedish film that came out in 1975, I believe. And it's like set in the year 1999. It's about the turn of the new millennium, and it's about totalitarianism between the USSR and the USA and nuclear bombs, and then they're in the bunkers and the outset of that. So definitely like a very groundbreaking film for its time as well. And he's like looking into the future of these kind of things unfolding. So no, he's definitely like. Definitely a director that had a lot of fear and wanted to voice that concern to to his audience, isn't he?
Yeah. No, a lot of his films look really interesting. We should add a few of these to the list as well. We're doing. There's a one also 1967. So just after he'd done After the War Game, just before he left England. I don't know if you heard of it, but called Privilege. It's like a science fiction musical, comedy and drama as well. So it's a bit weird to start with. I've never heard of it.
I'm not a musical person, unfortunately, but
still gonna go. What about the South Park musical?
Oh, that's the exception to the rule. Yeah.
Well, I'm warning you. Okay. I'm getting pretty sick of him calling my mom. Well, cause I'm the bitch, she's a big fat bitch, she's the biggest bitch in the whole wide world. She's a stupid bitch, and everyone's a bitch, she's a bitch to all the boys and girls. Shut your fucking mouth, Carmen!
But no, the actual summary is really interesting. So it actually tells a story of a famous pop star who was actually used by a tool of the state to divert people from political activity and keep the population in check.
Okay.
So it's in the 60s. Yeah, very interesting. I wouldn't mind giving it a watch.
Yeah. I was reading too. Apparently, when was it? Yeah, John Lennon and Yoko Ono in doing their bed-in protest or something.
Yeah.
It was 1969. They quoted this film as like one of the thing that really stuck with them. And
I believe he actually wrote them a letter.
Yeah,
saying that people like you ought to do something, and it kind of hit home with them.
Yeah, maybe that influence on him too. I mean, then a year later, he wrote with Mansion, didn't he, old John Lennon? A bit ironic, wasn't it, that song?
Yeah.
His $1 Million Mansion telling them, a world without possessions, but on the grand piano.
That's a very cynical observation.
Probably not, no. Well, I mean, when Yoko Ono stole him away from the Beatles, actually, a bit, kind of lost a bit of interest in him then,
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's interesting that his letter to John Lennon got him thinking about it and was a big part of it, doing that bed-in protest. And I mean, yeah, you can be a bit cynical about the protest, but it raised attention, right? And it was it went global. Everyone there's everyone's seen the famous photos of him with Yoko Ono. Was it in New York City, I believe it was at the time. Yeah, and you see like Central Park in the background there and stuff. So no, even to have this guy being even a little bit of an influence on that is pretty crazy, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So we'll get into the film, and we break it into 4 sections, I would say. So yeah, there's obviously the pre-attack tensions rising, then obviously then the blast itself, then the immediate aftermath, and the efforts there, and then obviously then the ending where it's the long-term consequences where we're seeing it jump forward a bit, and then the effects on the people and stuff. So
yep.
So yeah, the film starts off in in the pretext where there's like a fictional thing in Vietnam where China enters the war, and that ensues, and then that brings America bringing tactical nukes into Vietnam.
Yeah, America have decided to use tactical nukes, which actually is right away. I mean, look, the opening of the film, it kind of starts with that like stark explanation of the Britain's nuclear deterrent policy. So that rolling
like Star Wars credits,
pretty much like Star Wars credits.
Yeah.
But I love the way like you see the policeman on the bike, and it's kind of that over the shoulder shot on the camera when he's driving through. But yeah, you can hear on the radio the urgency in the radio, but it's still done in that very cold classic newsreader, like the news 16th of September. Today.
20,000 people died, and yes, we move on. Yeah, it is like that, isn't it? Yeah.
Chinese forces invade Vietnam.
Yeah,
very much like that, you know.
Or I think he's like taking the piss out of that propaganda kind of isn't it? Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
But it's interesting. Yeah, as you say, it's the Chinese invasion, and as a response, the US have moved over to tactical nukes. But then I think the Soviets and in East Germany
they're riling up tensions with West Berlin, aren't they?
Yeah, so they believe that that's going to be the flashpoint. But it's interesting because it made me think of like, I wonder how like was it ever feared that nuclear escalation in Vietnam was a thing? And I look back, I've had a look. Apparently, the US seriously considered it in some declassified documents.
Oh wow!
So in a couple of things, in 1968 during the siege of Khe Sanh, there were actually internal Pentagon discussions about possible nuclear responses if the base was about to be overrun. Eisenhower apparently in 1954 considered using nukes to help the French at Dien Bien Phu, but it was never gone through because I guess at this point when there was French Indochina War, wasn't there, when the US were trying to help?
Yeah.
But the French were trying to hold on to their colony, really, weren't they?
Yeah, and also to America trying to say, oh, we're against imperialism and things like that, so they kind of couldn't really interfere, you know. Yeah.
But then I think I was watching something the Vietnam War documentary on Netflix. What's it? The Turning Point.
Oh, the new recently one.
It was interesting. Yeah. It was showing that the French had actually played it to their hand because they knew about obviously the US's domino theory and the fear of like everything falling through, and they tried to make out like, oh no, this is actually part of the Cold War. We're fighting to stop communism. No, you're not. You're fighting.
I think Eisenhower read right through it.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too because when you think of where it got close to using nuclear weapons in a war sense, everyone goes back to the Korean War, right? Where you know where
old MacArthur.
Yeah, MacArthur. Yeah, I can't bomb half a bridge. You know, it's just like, oh man, yeah. What is it? Yeah, I think Truman was like, mate, you got to go, mate.
Truman handled that one pretty well.
Yeah, he was glad to get rid of him, but he hated him. So
yeah. Well done, mate. Enjoy your retirement.
Yeah. But that's interesting because you never. You always, when you think of the Vietnam War, it's always the footage of like the napalm and the Agent Orange and stuff. You wouldn't actually think. You always think that at that stage they're like, oh no, we can't, because it's 3 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Oh, we can't allow this cat out the bag kind of thing. So,
but there was belief.
But you were saying
even tactical news. I think there was a belief that a war could be limited. Which is never just fucking stupid. But yeah, even looking back at some quotes from Robert McNamara, obviously Secretary of Defense at the time. He said that the US came close to using nukes multiple times, and war and escalation was constantly just over the horizon. Curtis LeMay, it'll be no surprise, actually mentioned he was actually famously hawkish. I think he even said that the resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis was a loss for Kennedy. That's Curtis LeMay's thing, and he thought we should have invaded or used tactical nukes.
We got them. We might as well use them.
That's Curtis LeMay. Yeah, like fucking how the hell Kennedy worked that one. But yeah, he advocated for overwhelming force, and he didn't rule them out. But yeah, as you say,
can I just say, I'm very glad they didn't use nuclear weapons because Agent Orange didn't do any damage to the landscape or the people down the track, did it?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, everything but that, wasn't it? Yeah. But yeah, so go on.
Yeah. No, it's a good. That is a good point. Yeah, because I mean the after effects are very, very similar. Yeah, I've been to the museum there in Ho Chi Minh City or what was Saigon, and I've seen some. There's actually a dead baby in a tube there that you see of the after effects of. It's pretty confronting.
Even just when you see the aerial footage from those documentaries you see in the Vietnam War, even just you see the landscape of the trees and stuff, all rotting and dying. It's so depressing looking at it. Yeah. Then the effects on the people and then the animals and the ecosystem.
Well, I guess the thinking with the insurgency fighting, and as we already mentioned in last week's episode, that They can't hide in the trees if there are no trees.
Exactly.
And that was the thinking. Yeah, fucking hell.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, interesting. Then I just wanted to check. His research says here it's since come out that the US were very close to using tactical nuclear weapons in Vietnam.
Yeah, I think another point would have been too that if they did use them, that would have brought the Soviet Union and China into the fact. So they probably would have been like, "Oh, better not, can't risk it," kind of thing. Yeah,
yeah. I think Lyndon Johnson was actually very, very cautious. He was the one that sort of kept the boys at bay. He kept Curtis LeMay particularly.
Well, he was in the Situation Room during the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So yeah, he was definitely aware what was going on.
Yeah, and thankfully so.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're still here today, aren't we? Yeah.
For how long?
Yeah. Touch wood.
Yeah, for how long? Let's drop in the X-Files music.
Yeah. So that sets the premise up. Yeah, so that's the scenario, right, of what's going on at the time. And then it cuts to, they're kind of preparing for, because of this risk that's going on that's been alerted, they're preparing Britain, right, for, they're lifting up their game of the defence effort, right? Now
it's the point where it's the regional government takeover now. So the idea, and if you look at like Cold War policy would have been to transfer control from central government to regional authorities. So I think there'd been about 15. The idea being, I guess...
I think it was 15, 16, wasn't it? Yeah.
One strike on London takes out the government.
So I think before that, too, the film does it too, where it shows a graphic of England, and it shows all the bases, right, of where they're all stationed there. So it was kind of like saying, if there was to be a nuclear exchange, they're going to target these stations. So this is why it's in peril that we have 16 different regional governments. Then this is the place we got to evacuate to the country areas. Yeah.
And it kind of actually paints the picture that per capita... there's more nuclear targets in Britain.
It was kind of showing how stupid it was, right? Yeah.
Even as we get into a little bit later, they're talking about evacuating the cities, like this whole, which they did in the Second World War. For what? Like, all right. If the initial blast doesn't get you, the fallout will. What do you can't run from this? And but that's the belief of that civil defense. Like, no, we're fucking war behind again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Like, but this is again the Home Office did not educate the people on this. Precisely because if they were educated on it, they'd be rioting in the streets and trying to advocate against nuclear deterrence. So you can see why it all goes into the band.
And this is at a time too when they're trying to push like nuclear for everything, like even energy and
really the whole foreign policy of Britain was to keep US occupied in Europe and keep them in Europe because they understood that they kind of had to leverage that relationship. And the US, this was the US's response, and this is how the US wanted to go. So England kind of they had no real choice, but
just to tag along. Yeah,
they had to sort of remain relevant within NATO and with the US. So I can definitely understand both sides of this.
Yeah, of course. And there was an attack on either. It was Article 5 of NATO, isn't it? When attack on one, attack of us all. So that makes sense definitely.
And this is the cost of. Well, they're no longer the world police, so that was kind of what they had to. This is how they could survive, basically. So.
Yeah. It was America's turn now.
It was America, the new sheriff in town.
Yeah. And Clint Eastwood walking down the street.
But yeah. So no, this is very factually correct when you look back at some of the Home Office documents that the regional government takeover would happen and they look at this in threads, obviously, as we see later. I guess because the idea being. A strike on central London, the whole country collapses. So it kind of spread power out.
And just on that too, I think, Peter Watkins actually called the Home Secretary and all these people to get all this information so he could have it all factually there. So there was no like ifs and buts. Oh, this is exaggerated. This is, you're just spinning the truth. He's like, no, this is actually all from your doctrine. So you can't question it.
Yeah. And I guess there's that idea where like, and we see that you don't see the regional commissioners in this movie. I'm at the start. We see that more in threads, right? It mimics that whole concept of control, or we can run it from these bunkers where they can't do anything. They're ill prepared. Yeah, you don't see it as much in this, but it's still factually correct. Very correct.
Well, I was at that point too where he gets like the camera then's like kind of like he's like you're like a third person view on a bus that all the people getting evacuated out of the city, right? And it's interesting that they focus on one. I think it's like a black lady. I think it is, or Indian.
She'd be from the Caribbean. From the Windrush generation, I would say.
No, I was reading too that this was around the time too period where a lot of the colonies, like a lot of the Commonwealth countries, were then moving, from the Caribbeans and other parts of the world, were moving to the mainland. Windrush, exactly. So, and I remember thinking, okay, that's interesting that they zoomed in on her, but then it makes sense why they did that down when he then says one person goes, "Oh, I don't want to let colours in my place."
So they're not coloured, are they?
Yeah. I was like,
but I appreciate the fact that Peter Watkins and Peter Watkins being Peter Watkins, he never shied away from that.
Yeah.
Showing at the time, it was
Oh, it would have been like that, absolutely, yes. Well, you look in America, that's when the civil rights stuff was all happening, so definitely would have been an influence in thinking like that.
Yeah, it was showing the fact that, again, it's trying to push this whole blitz spirit thing, which is like, oh, let's all, keep calm and carry on, and there's these racial tensions already happening in community,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I love about this next part, too, because they're being evacuated, it's to Kent, isn't it, where the premise of the film is set?
Kent.
Yeah, so where's Kent in relation to the UK?
Kent's further south, so just out of London, but if you would be heading towards kind of, I don't know, Canterbury, Dover, it would kind of take all those areas, but it's countryside.
Okay.
But they also spoke about, even the regional commissioners earlier, they were talking about, people would be going to Northumberland or the Lake District. So I guess it's I mean, the country is like 20 minutes out of, it's like that South Park episode when they go hunting and it takes like 2 seconds and they're up in the country.
Yes,
that's basically what England's like,
Yeah, because obviously we're relocated in Australia, and Australia's such a big continent, right? It's huge. Where you kind of it's so the island of Britain is so small in comparison to where we are in Australia. Like, it's hard to fathom. Like, oh, we're in the countryside now. It's like, well, if you drop a nuclear bomb, it's not going to make a difference to where you're located, really, is it?
And I think that's the reason why. Like, if you look at again, being a war behind, there's no point evacuating. There's really no point evacuating, but I guess you're giving people hope, I suppose. That's you're giving them one thing, but there were no bunkers for civilians.
No.
Whereas other countries were building like bunkers. I think most notably Sweden were building like communal bunkers and that. In England, they're like, well, we're not. Like, I guess there's a lot of fatalism. Like, what's the point? You're not going to survive this. There's this. I don't know what the population was back then. Say it was 50 million on an island that small.
Yeah,
living on top of one another, you ain't got a chance. Why are we going to spend the money on this?
No, it makes no sense. Yeah, it's just unfortunately, like, even how cold and macabre that is, it's the truth, isn't it? Yeah, like, why would you? Like, it's just
well, why have a worse life now with the cost of living and it's not going to mean that blind bit of difference when if or when it does happen.
Yeah,
I get that logic. I do
exactly, and like, to their defense, in a way, like, luckily it didn't happen, right? So then they can justify going, exactly.
But then if it did happen, we'd never know.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it kind of worked both ways.
Yeah, but they win. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can see the logic.
Yeah. Well, we get to that point too. They're getting off the bus, and we're starting to see like locals in Kent having to house other people. So they were going, oh, how many people? Oh, yep, yeah, your household, 5 people here, bang, done. Yeah, if you got room for 8 people, and the one guy's like, no, I can't house 8 people. It's
enforced billeting, they call it.
Yeah. Well, people are starting to lose their bit of their freedom and their rights and stuff, like, because it's in that emergency situation.
Well, society's now collapsing. All right, yeah, this used to be your house. Now it's the states.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, that illusion of that veneer of society is now gone. This is happening now. These are the rules.
It's like, well, yeah, you can protest that, but we're just going to throw you in jail. So, yeah, I think you've got a better chance of survival in your own home than you're doing in a prison cell. So, like,
yeah, it even mentions that, like, there was people had fled a house and it's now been requisitioned by the government. So that's
right. They barred the door down.
Which was policy.
Oh, it would have been. Yeah,
it was
definitely.
Policy. Yeah.
But yeah, and then because you think what I like too, he's showing how stupid it is as well. The way he films it, like these little English terraces, like 8 people in like a terrace of probably 2 better terrace. Like, how are you going to house that many people and cook and clean? Oh, it'd be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, and I think what it does mention is like the even the evacuate. It was only so any able-bodied men of 18 or over would have to stay and keep the economy going.
Yeah,
and
right.
That's like you're sitting so the women would leave, women, children, and everyone would go, and men would just have to stay and keep the economy going. But it was twofold, because the minute the lights went out and the economy was seen to be stopping, there was worry of like Soviet agents and stuff there would worry that like, oh no, they're preparing for a first strike, so they would have to kind of stay and keep that veneer of normal.
Yeah.
And also it's even what's very good in that they were saying even without nuclear war, an evacuation of major cities like that, it would delay the recovery of the economy from like I think he says 1.5 to 4 years, even if there was no nuclear war.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think in the film it says that if you try to evacuate, was it 10 million people, wasn't it, from their places? Yeah. Even just the process of doing that from their regular jobs, regular whatever it is going on, it takes at least 4 or 5 years for the British economy to even recover from it. Like, let alone like be back and thriving again. Like, you can imagine the flow-on effect of that. It'd be crazy.
Yeah.
And it just even just like, I guess too, like the I think today we've got like faster rail and better transport. But back then, it would have been pretty basic stuff, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
No aircon on those bloody buses, right?
No.
So I think we get then to the point to just after that where like they're doing the test runs and stuff, aren't they? The streets, the
civil defense,
like the policemen in the cars doing the sirens, and it has that real ominous feel to it, doesn't it?
The air raid sound. It's not a nice sound, that. Yeah.
So it's an impending doom coming, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that the cargo that's testing the sirens out, but you now see. I think he actually asked one of the civil defense volunteers a question. So you now see the civil defense booklets being handed out.
Oh, that's right.
Going door to door, handing them out, and that was, as we said before, they were only to be handed out just before the war. So, like, these, as these books say, they were like filled with contradictions. About sandbagging a house and holding 2 weeks worth of food. And it shows now like that panic buying is ensuing. Where it's like, so you think that there's going to be enough supplies and people aren't going to be panicking, and now the veneer society is now gone, and it's every man for themselves. So like, and they're showing like, I can only afford, talking about shillings and things, which I don't know what they are, but I can only afford this many sandbags or this many, and it's showing that the average Briton is the working class have absolutely got no chance here. And then it goes to one of the guy with his gun. He's obviously quite middle class because he's like wearing a suit, and he's I've got a mate who is a carpenter, so I've got all these from here, and he's okay. Yeah. His house is somewhat sandbagged.
Yeah, and he's got the bunker outside, doesn't he?
He's got the bunker outside.
Yeah, I think it's at that point too where it said like if everyone had their own bunkers and safety equipment and stuff, it would cost the British economy £2 billion, and that's back in 1966 money too. Like, so that'd be like, I don't know what it'd be now, $10 billion, $12 billion, right? But it's just astronomical. Yeah, it's not feasible at all.
Not feasible, yeah. And then to hold like most people at the time going day to day to have 2 weeks worth of food, it's not possible. And you're even it goes more absurd, and we spoke about this more on the Threads episode with like, whitewash your windows to keep the heat out. We're talking about, I don't know, with millions and millions of fucking degrees of centigrade, like of these hydrogen bombs. Like, how's it going to stand up to that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, what I like too as well, he starts seeing the like the Vox Pop interviews with people on the street, and this is the part I thought, did they actually use real people or was these actors? And then I found out later they were actors, but I thought what he was trying to do was like film normal British people in the street and ask them these questions, and then put in the film to show like how people have got no idea what to do, or they don't think it's going to escalate. They've actually been actors anyway, but because he did that way, it made you think it was real. So,
well, I guess on the point, like I think there were people who had really no acting experience. They were just regular people, so it kind of did add to it.
Yeah. No, but it's more that like I just
they were prepped.
Yeah, like, prepped. Yeah, I just thought it was just he just went down the random street and found people. But but that's how effectively well filmed it is. That it made me think that. So when I first watched it, But yeah, then you're seeing people going, I'm not too worried. It should be fine. And he was asking basically,
it won't escalate.
Won't escalate. Nah, should be fine.
I should think we'll be fine. Yes.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah, very, very like seriousness to it too. But then at one stage they were saying, if the Soviets attacked us, should we attack back? They go, Britain's never stood down from down before. Of course we should retaliate, kind of thing. Yeah. But then it cuts to that scene where the things are escalating in Berlin too. So you're seeing like like a makeshift barricades of where the Berlin Wall is, and then people fighting, and then I think one of the East German soldiers like shoots one of the protesters, and then it like fades away again back to Britain again. But yeah, it's very fascinating seeing that where you're showing the different tensions going around the world. Yeah. It's starting to escalate everywhere. So
all the different flashpoints. You got. I guess they're all kind of linked, right? It's all linked to what's happening in the Vietnam War. Yeah, very, very, very clever.
Yeah, and then we get to the point too where they're. Other two, it's kind of like it shows where the tactical nuke is on the battlefield in Vietnam.
What do they call it? The Honest John.
The Honest John. Yeah, they got the kind of like a stereotypical American accent going, we're gonna fire them, boys. That kind of thing. Yeah, like that's around the comical side of it a bit. And then that's when it explains too that a tactical nuke, like the one that you see in the film, is the equivalent of one Hiroshima or something. So it was pretty freaky. And
how far did it come in? Just over 20 years?
Yeah, I was thinking too, like, I wonder how he filmed that, because it looked very realistic, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah, and then because obviously when it fires, it kind of like cuts away then. So I wonder how he edited, because especially back in those days, like filming techniques not like it is now. Like I thought it was really impressive the way he did that. That's that shot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, very impressive.
Well, at that point too, we're following a doctor. He's in his late 30s. I'm like, geez, mate, like you look like in your 50s. But Oh,
Everyone looked older.
On those days, yeah.
Wearing a suit, you know.
You're wearing suit, yeah. I'm like, geez, mate, I'm almost the same age as you, and I don't look like that. But, all right, but yeah, he's treating he's going to
like a house call,
doing a house call. So I think kids like got something sick or something, and then we start to see because he's in the house, and then seeing the backyard, the people outside. And then there's the civil defense people out in the street, like the police officers and stuff. And then next thing you know, the siren goes.
Yeah.
And then it's funny too. It shows it so well where people just kind of have that 5-second thing where they look at each other like deers in the headlights. They're just like,
oh, well, naturally you think it's a false alarm, wouldn't you?
But you also you'd be in shock, like, is this really happening? Like, yeah, you'd be freaking out. And even that they're outside, and even like the guard kind of like looks aimless a bit. He like looking around and he goes, no, come inside.
He goes to the car and he's like, no, you got to get in.
Get in, yeah. You got like 3 minutes, mate. What are you doing? And
This could be the way the last 2 minutes of peace in Britain would look.
I think it really illustrates too, like, you can do all these civil defense things, you can do this, bunker it down. What if you're out down the shops when the siren goes? How are you going to get home in time? Or where if you're down elsewhere, like it just shows you how like stupid the whole thing is. The whole thing is. Yeah, and it really illustrates that too. But yeah, we're seeing like the house where they're maneuvering the kitchen table or the dining table around, and they're trying to duck and cover with it. Basically, like
like Bert the Turtle. Did you ever see the 1951 infomercials in America?
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah,
Bert the Turtle.
Duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover.
Yes.
And this was the thing. This kind of stuff, the civil defense campaigns and pamphlets and Bert the Turtle, really made people think that nuclear war was survivable. That's the saddest thing, you know. I
mean, like, in one way, it's good in a way because then you don't want people to go into chaos for no reason. But on the other hand, it's like it's false information though. Like it's very extremely misleading, isn't it?
What would you prefer? Like, would you? And it's dark. I mean, it's not as if you've come on this podcast for positivity.
Yeah.
So we're going here. Would you prefer to die without hope, or would you prefer to know the truth?
Yeah, it's.
Sorry, like
ignorant bliss, or It's,
I don't know. I mean, I guess I know what I know now, but.
Well, it's kind of like, would you, if you were at Hiroshima, would you like to be the ones at Ground Zero, just got who were basically came up the stairs there, where their shadows on there, or would you rather be the ones that had the fallout and then the
side effects? I would rather go instantly.
But then they had no idea it was coming either, right?
Yeah.
It's just,
but is that whole thing of like, I guess the civil defense thing and what I want to believe that like if I just follow all the advice of the civil defense pamphlet, then I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Or like. Would I rather know the truth? I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is in that one.
Yeah, it's one of those conundrums, isn't it?
I guess ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah. I mean, for your own sanity, I guess you'd probably go with ignorance, wouldn't you?
I think you probably would.
Or you just just as you head in the sand stuff, like everything's fine. You should, the attitude, she'll be right. A bit like that, yeah.
Yeah. You sort of, again, I get the government, you can understand it, they're damned if they did, they're damned if they didn't, right? It's, yeah. The truth isn't always best, you know?
No, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's at this point where it kind of so they've been warned, they're getting ready for it. The blast then happens, and that's when the flash of light happens. That's the first thing you see, right? And I think a kid gets like some people's eyes,
retina's burnt. Yeah,
they're burnt out because was it 30 times stronger than the direct sunlight at midday? Yeah, insane. Yeah, so you'd be instantly blind from that. Because I think the kid just, and then the thing later on too, I think one of the kid just looks at it because he obviously would have liked the flash, then that instantly blinded him too. So, and then also people's skin was getting on fire too from the flash of light as well. The shockwave hits then right after that, and then that's when the real chaos unfolds when you're seeing the inside the house. I mean, it's a bit dated now, but like the fires on the curtains and stuff, and they're all scrambling and stuff. But then after that, that's when the shockwave hits, and that's when all chaos ensues, right?
Yeah. And what I like it now drops to the point. So at this time, it wasn't widely known that I guess nuclear winter was a thing, right? So
I have no idea,
what they showed here was a firestorm, which they genuinely believe would happen. So the firestorm, and what's good all throughout the film, they kind of show like there was someone calm saying, "Oh, look, if this happens," it's some real calm sort of voice saying, "Oh no, this is the plan, this is it," and then the next shot goes straight to the chaos of it.
Yeah,
like, this is what you say happens, and this is how it actually is, mate. You know, like it's very clever, like the pattern of it.
Yeah.
It's actually when we talk about RoboCop the other week when it was talking about like it would go like violent scene, advert. Violent scene, advert.
Yeah.
This is done in quite a similar way.
Yeah, it is.
In that
actually.
sense, like advice, and then here's what that actually looks like. It's but I thought the firestorm was really cool.
Yeah.
And it actually talked about, it mentioned like, this was seen at Hiroshima, this was seen at Dresden, this was seen at Hamburg.
It was like winds of up to 100 mile an hour or something, and because it needs the fires taking all the oxygen out.
Well,
so
essentially, what had happened? So what had happened at Dresden, and obviously we've mentioned Dresden, kind of we're obliged to mention Bomber Harris.
Yeah,
but we'll get on to Bomber Speak Fritz, get the Blitz Harris later.
Yeah,
if you like.
Yeah,
England's answer to Curtis LeMay.
Yeah,
but yeah, essentially with a firestorm. So like, I think a nuclear bomb or a massive conventional bombing, like either we mentioned Dresden or Hiroshima, it ignites like thousands of fires, and kind of those fires all join together. Essentially, like the hot air would over thousands of degrees would go up, but then the air from around it would be moving through, and the air from around it would actually just be fueling it.
Sucks it all
in.
in.
Just sucking all the oxygen out. So this like sort of vacuum effect. So it would just fuel itself. I reckon like a lot of people would die from just asphyxiation from like miles away. It would just take all the oxygen out. They just choke to death. It just really. I mean, that's what we saw that happened in Dresden.
It's like a tornado, like crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I think one lady says like in the aftermath to the camera crew, whatever it is, like documentary style, saying, "Oh, I just saw a guy like fly basically because he just got sucked away from it. When they were trying to put out the fire." Yeah. It's that constant. You can't comprehend it. Saying a firestorm would be pretty. You think like hell on earth, right? Things like Dante's Inferno or something.
Well, you would. I think even they mentioned in Dresden and Hamburg, like a lot of the lower houses and stuff underground, it would just like suck all the oxygen out, and then just people would just instantly die. It was just horrible, really.
Yeah. Well, actually, I know it's not quite relevant for this, but like Kurt Vonnegut, he was a famous author. He was a POW in Germany during the Dresden bombing. He said that the only reason he survived was because he was underground in the prison cells.
And what was the book he wrote?
Slaughterhouse 5.
Yeah, I think he mentions Dresden in that.
He does,
right?
he does.
Like a time travel thing or something?
Yeah, time travel thing. Yeah, it is.
I meant to read that, but
yeah, no, we'll do it in a future episode. Yeah, but no, he was just talking about how that the event of Dresden and how much like how lucky he was. But he was getting tortured by the German army and stuff. But then at the same time, like being locked under the cell saved his life in that instance. So he's very fortunate in that regard. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it would have been terrifying.
Yeah, I guess, and this scene, like, it doesn't shy away from, I guess, showing like crying babies and kids, and it just happens to everyone.
Yeah.
What I do appreciate is there's no dying animals in this, which is nice.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it left that alone, because I couldn't do any more dead dogs, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, we've done quite a few animals, haven't we, recently?
We have,
Unfortunately.
So it was nice. Yeah. Well, it wasn't on camera, so that was good,
Yeah. I think too, because it is filmed in black and white too. It adds a more coldness to it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and again, well, that was the only technology they had at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess by design, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Even with the black and white camera, you're seeing the people's faces. You can definitely see like all the charcoal and the blackness on their face from all the debris and the destruction of it all. Like it's very well. And the way he shakes the camera too at times, where it feels like you're on the ground with them and like you're dealing with the chaos. Yeah. I guess too. Then after that, we go to the point where it's like more the aftermath, right? So the immediate aftermath. So we saw the fire brigade putting out the fires, and then there was like the provisional government's like stockpiling the food, like they're not letting people have like allocated the stock, like they're getting the government's imposing like martial law, and then people are starting to getting a bit frustrated with certain things. Other people are getting radiation sickness. Then we start to see a bit of some of the medical facilities are being overrun. Yes, survivors are struggling with psychological effects as well, and there's that bleak nihilism too to it all. Like, what's the point? Why there's no. We can't see a light at the end of the tunnel, really, can we?
I think there's no scene that shows that better. The absolute collapse of it, and the aftermath is that the collapse of like the NHS afterwards. Like I guess you see the medical and moral collapse, and it now talks about the role of the doctor. The doctors basically now become. It's almost become now a filtering process. He puts these people into 3 categories. I read into this in some. There was like some of the National Archives of British Defence Policy about the role of the NHS in the advent of nuclear war. And it's horrible. Like it's talking about it's basically save who can be saved. And look, you can understand it because
it's logical, right?
Yeah, I guess medicine would be stockpiled, and there's no one manufacturing any new medicine, so it becomes scarce now, right? I guess you'd only really be put into an ambulance if you were considered likely to survive. No medicine or time or effort will be wasted on anyone that's too weak or injured to save, because then you're going to waste medicine, and what's the point? You need able-bodied people working, right?
Yeah.
Even basically easing of suffering was actually off the table. There's no painkillers. There's no nothing. The worst thing is, and he talks about essentially putting people into three classes. So one, I guess, these are people that were kind of, all right, they were injured, but they could be saved. So medicine could be using it. Second would be ones that possibly aren't too bad, so they need rest and they're okay. The third would be the ones that will be held. And that was the one that was like, these are the people that are like, 50% burns or radiation sickness. They would essentially put them in like a holding room. Now in the movie, I guess it's more in the movie this is where you see the police actually easing their suffering, shooting them. I don't believe that's happening. That's too kind. I guess it's more symbolic, right?
Yeah.
When you see the police putting people down, they're not wasting bullets in this. This, I guess, the response was essentially they put in a holding room and left to die.
Yeah, that's the worst fate.
Oh fuck no! And like
watching someone rot away.
Yeah, and you could imagine like it's radiation sickness. Like you are basically.
Yeah, you want the bullet, wouldn't you?
Oh, you're either vomiting or shitting yourself to death. Essentially, you can imagine that room. I remember I was reading it. I was like, fucking hell! Like it just
sounds like a bit like something like the Holocaust or something.
Oh, it's grim. It is grim. But yet the NHS would basically become a filter, a grim filter that could save.
It has to, yeah.
And it's kind of logical. Well, it is logical. Yeah. You'd save who you could, and you would just leave the rest to die just in a room away. There, that's yeah. And I think he shows in the movie. I think it's a symbolic nature of the policeman putting them out of their misery, which is they show it for that reason. But yeah, I don't think they're using bullets. They're not wasting them because they need them to keep the population in check. Yeah, bullets are scarce,
Yeah, I'm not sure. Previously we talked about how like there's a lot of guns in Britain compared to like America, right? I wonder what because there would have been more gun. Because you see the gun in the film at the start with the guy going into the bunker. I wonder what the gun laws were like back then.
There are a lot of guns. A lot of farmers have a lot of guns in the UK.
Yeah,
plenty of them. Yeah. What's it on Hot Fuzz? Everyone and the mums has guns around here. We'll drop that in.
Yeah.
You do know there are more guns in the country than there are in the city.
Everybody and their mums is packing around there.
Like who? Farmers? Who else?
Farmers' mums.
No, but it's more the fact of like I think the laws wouldn't have been as strict as they are now on guns. So maybe the police would have had more resources than guns to do stuff like that. But yeah, it is a bit. Yeah, I think as you said, I think they would have kept them for what we see later in the film for the looters and stuff like that, keeping control.
Well, that was the role. We've spoken about the role of the NHS in the film, the role of the police in the film. Again, it shows it afterwards. The role of the police is kind of protect food supply, because obviously food becomes currency. But even in the days leading up to nuclear war, a lot of it was keeping the roads clear. A lot of it was almost predictive. Well, yes, predictive policing. Getting rid of dissenters or people that would become a problem after nuclear war. We don't see it in this, but we see it more in threads where, when the woman's like, oh, you can't win a nuclear war, and she's running up the crowd, and the police quietly sort of take her away and put them in prison. Yeah. Because you don't want anyone like that around after the war. Like the population now becomes the enemy. Yeah. And I guess that's the point that he makes in this movie, right? That the society or that we're not here to protect you anymore. Like we're going to move on. It's going to be authoritarian from now.
It's funny. We kind of got a little glimpse of that kind of, during the COVID times that we had those restrictions, like you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't be out here, whatever it is. And, people would still disobey the rules and then they end up getting arrested and stuff. Like, you'd have to like preempt people that would act like that under these conditions and just like throw them away and like in prison or keep them away from, putting bad ideas in people's heads as well, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's right. And it's the thing with this, I mean, you can't have some sort of free democratic state in times of crisis. I would argue that the government does what the government has to do in times of crisis. There's no room for bloody free thinking or free movement or a democracy in this time. I guess that's, in my opinion, democracy is weak in those situations. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's just well, that's the whole point of like a crisis, right? We saw that in World War II, right? When Churchill became prime minister, it became the de facto the ruling governor basically of the whole UK, right? So, and they didn't hold elections or anything like that during that time as well. So yeah. So that I think that's the best way to run it, right? Because
I would get it's horses for courses, and times need different approaches.
It's one of those things like depending on the circumstances. Like you have your wartime presidents, prime ministers, and then your non-time. So. Yeah, like for example, Churchill was great during war times, but then non-war times he was
Clement Attlee took over.
Exactly, he got ousted. So.
And that's why you sit there with like this bloke single-handedly. Well, not single-handedly, but if Churchill doesn't rise to prominence and come to power and keep England, just keep them in the war, then God knows what the world looks like. Yeah, and how he could be then voted out before the war ends, and then Clement Attlee comes in.
And then just from like the American perspective, that the fact that they because it's always got the 2 terms where they actually put FDR for 3 terms. Like lucky that he was in control then. Yeah,
what a president!
I know.
But he took them through the Great Depression.
Yeah, I know. No, I think he did. In my opinion, I reckon he's the greatest president of all time. FDR.
Well, we should probably try and stay on target.
Yeah, I know.
But on that, I mean, what a sliding doors moment.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, we're talking about atoms.
We're talking about nuclear weapons, right?
Yeah. Do you think FDR drops that bomb on Hiroshima? It is a hard one.
Yeah, probably not. No.
Because he was more of a. I guess he was more of a humanist than Truman was, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he wasn't as influenced by the military people as Truman was as well. Yeah, Truman was trying to prove himself, where FDR wasn't trying to prove anything.
Well, I think as we've established before, I think in that Oliver Stone documentary, you lent me The Untold History of the US, and we're talking about it. Did a bit of a backstory on Truman, talking about he kind of always had a chip on his shoulder and he wanted to prove people wrong, and you don't know how much of that plays into his thoughts.
Yeah, and also the kind of like sliding doors moment where he got in by a hair nose basically as the VP.
Well, it could have been.
It should have been Henry Wallace.
Henry Wallace. Yeah.
And he was in that.
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah. Well, it was stay on target, but
stay on target. We're too close. Stay on target.
Yeah, that's another topic another day.
But I see. I don't know. I don't think that the atomic bomb probably would have been dropped. I think if you're thinking about it in the context at the time when like firebombing raids over like Tokyo and Dresden and Hamburg were killing hundreds of thousands anyway, I guess from what they were spending on munitions, I guess they would have seen from a cost point of view, they would have seen that, here's one bomb that can do it. I guess it's hard. We're thinking back with what we know now.
Yeah. I think, actually thinking about it, I think maybe most likely, and obviously too, FDR was like, he was, dying basically, wasn't he? So he wasn't at his full wits towards the end too. He was getting very sick, and so maybe he would have just pulled the trigger eventually. I don't know.
And God knows the human cost of actually invading Japan. I know the propaganda numbers go up and up and up as more it was, what was it, hundreds of thousands of lives, now it's millions of lives.
Yeah, millions of lives.
Just to justify the dropping of it. But were Japan going to surrender anyway because of the Soviets were joining the war? I don't know. It's a hard. Anyway, that's another podcast. Where were we?
Sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah, we can go down these bloody rabbit holes, can't we? Yeah,
we can.
So yeah, we're talking about just like the aftermath of the bomb blast and stuff, and I love that part too, where it shows people are they're demanding food, and then the police are holding them back, and then they just round up those people that have who are committing crimes, and then they just line them up in the streets and just execute them.
Yeah,
it was so like really imagine. I can see why at the time like people would have found this documentary, I hate to use the word, but problematic, right? So there would have been very shocking footage of seeing things like that, and the grim realism of it too, the way it's done, the way it's shot. So it feels like you're on the streets watching someone being executed. By the British government, basically.
This government where the police, as you mentioned before, they don't have weapons, and now it's just turned to this authoritarian state.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the old like British colonials, lining up. Oh, yep, up against the wall, boys. Yep, fucking just like like that. The red coats. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The Patriot movie with Mel Gibson, bit of that stuff.
Oh yeah. Those evil redcoats.
Yeah, the redcoats. Yeah. Laughs in British. Yeah.
Actually, there is a bit that I find really cool around this point with the he's either a scientist or a psychologist. I don't think it really mentions, but he has a point like we're technically in an atomic age, but emotionally we're still in the Stone Age. The Aztecs on their feast days would sacrifice 20,000 people to keep the world that they knew going, and we think today we're superior to them.
Yeah, that's very fascinating.
After everything you've seen, and I guess this nuclear brinkmanship that's gone wrong and everything blown up, it's you see that like perhaps we're all right. We've got all this technology, but as we established before, the
monkey brains,
the hardware in our mind has never changed. So we're still as stupid as we kind of were back then. We should not be trusted with these weapons, but. I don't know, it's a human condition. We're not going to unlearn it, are we?
No, especially when fear and adrenaline kicks in, right? Your adrenaline instincts, it just goes back to those primal ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think they talk about the exchanges. I think he mentioned it was like 160 ICBMs that were used. So he says, it's estimated it would kill 1/3 to half of Britain's population. I actually think that's being very conservative. But as we said before, there's no mention of nuclear war wasn't even a theory. Nuclear winter wasn't even a theory at this time. So, in that initial blast, I think that's that many missiles. I can't see anyone surviving. Really.
I think too, because people are working off what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where the initial bomb blast and then the nuclear fallout, but because it was such on a small scale compared to what the hydrogen bombs when we go forward, like people didn't realize like the actual effects of it going forward, what would be like to the atmosphere and stuff. It was all just the immediate blast in the 2 weeks time frame. So they're using that as a reference. Whereas like no, that was the little leagues. We're in the big leagues now. Like when it comes to these bombs, and
we're
not talking about one. We're talking about multiple of them.
And the warheads on them now. It'd be. I mean, it's thousands of Hiroshimas. Like I couldn't even tell you where we are now. To be honest, I probably don't even want to know.
No, it's freaky, isn't it? Yeah.
But it does end with the film ends with like a warning that there's a possibility of another 12 countries acquiring nuclear weapons, which spoiler alert, they did.
Yeah.
And the scenes that you've seen in this documentary are more than likely to happen by the year 1980. So that shows you then that I guess he genuinely thought it was going to happen. He couldn't see how it couldn't happen.
Yeah. Especially as you said with the Vietnam War going on at that time as well, and tensions between the Americans and the Russians were at its peak as well. So definitely it would have been, and then also too he was thinking, well, no one's really talking about it too. Like we need to raise awareness about this.
I think that's the real danger. Is the fact that people just don't know about it, and that's the most you're sort of suppressing it. And it's
funny. You talk to like people in our parents' generation, and I've asked them like, oh, what was it like for you when growing up, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, we heard about it, but just. It was a bit freaky here and there, but nothing too serious. But like, fucking hell, it could have come a lot worse. Or,
well, see, I talked to my I talked to my dad about it. So my dad would have been 7 or 8 at this time, and growing up all through it in England, and he's unaware of it.
Yeah.
But then my dad's kind of got no imagination too, so he's sort of like he wouldn't. He was like, oh no, that wouldn't happen. You're like, fucking hell, very nearly did. Yeah, I guess. But my dad's very much a better fact.
Well, it didn't happen, so then
it didn't happen. I can't do anything about it. Get on with it. You know what I mean?
I guess there is a kind of a good way to view it in that way. In a way, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, but this shit actually genuinely keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
Just thinking like, I think it's that 4-minute warning and knowing that it's not in my control. Like,
you just like a headless chicken, wouldn't you?
You just sit there, that fear before it happens. And look, as we say, the movie ends. I guess he talks about media silence and there's a hope that we can stop something like this. Like there's still time. We can achieve unilateral nuclear disarmament. And again, that is wishful thinking. I get where I really like Peter Watkins and I've enjoyed his film. I've enjoyed learning about him, but there's no solution. Unilateral nuclear disarmament. That is not realistic. I can't see how anyone.
It's a bit like we said before, like the world would be a better place if we all just loved each other, kind of mentality.
Yeah.
It's like not going to happen,
I think there's no solution. And all right, I guess he's probably not there to provide a solution.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting him to provide a solution as well, but like as you said, like there's kind of he can't, but he's trying to give like a glimmer of hope where it's like, well, no, there's no real glimmer of hope in this kind of outcome, is there?
Yeah, as I say, realistically, like you can't realistically believe that everyone's just going to drop. Oh, you know what? You're absolutely right. Let's just not use his weapons anymore. If you agree, you're not going to use them. I mean, it's like you look at the polio virus. There was, I think they found years later where they were talking about weaponizing it during the Cold War. But they found out years later that there were still samples of it when it had been eradicated. There were still samples of it in a Soviet lab, and there were still samples of it in a US lab. So it was like sort of held back, like buried deep, just in case. Because it was that scheme of, well, well, what if you still have it?
Oh, how'd that get there? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it kind of, it's that old thinking of like, all right, it might not be there on the surface, but you would still see it. And then there's now a power vacuum for some rogue state to go and grab fucking a massive power advantage. Like, you can't honestly believe that we could all just sort of, put them away and walk hand in hand in the sunset. I just don't think.
Yeah, exactly. No, and it's nice too. The film does end with, what I said earlier, like Silent Night, Holy Night's playing, and then the camera cuts to different kids, like, coughing, and they're sick, and they got the black faces still, and then they're suffering from the radiation sickness and stuff. So and I think you said earlier in the episode too how he didn't like that where the song is happy, so that means we have a happy scene now. He's playing like a kind of a happy religious song in a real dire, desperate situation.
It's meant to be Christmas Day.
Yeah, Christmas Day. Yeah, it's real depressing and stuff.
Yeah, I think it talks about one kid like, he's suffering from this. He will never walk again. He'll lie in bed for 7 years and die. Yeah, this was seen at Hiroshima. You're like, fucking hell.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, this is the future for our future generations. You're just like, that's very heavy. Yeah. So I think then the film ends, right? So it's 1966, and he's thinking too that this is going to go on the BBC. It's going to come, this great warning to the whole country. It gets shelved, but then it gets shown at, we said earlier, some film festivals, and then it ends up winning the best documentary at the Academy Awards in 1967.
So it had never been shown in Britain, but won an Oscar in 1967.
And then no one, in country of origin, no one knows about it. So it's insane in that way, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, Roger Ebert gave the film a perfect score, calling it one of the most skillful films ever made. He praised the remarkable authenticity of the firestorm sequence and described its portrayal of bombings aftermath as certainly the most horrifying event ever put on film. They should string up bed sheets between the trees and show the war game in every public park, he concluded. Yeah, for him to say something like that shows the impact it had on him, and he's obviously a connoisseur of films, so for him to give it that kind of that praise and maybe that sickly feeling of watching it. So I wonder what he thought of Threads if he ever saw it.
Yeah, I think that point where he mentioned it was the most horrific nuclear war film ever put on TV. Probably until Threads, right?
Yeah.
I think interestingly, this was eventually released in 1985.
Yeah.
I think the night before Threads was.
It was the 40th anniversary of the Hiroshima bombings. Yeah.
And I think it was released the night before Threads. There was a whole time because when they'd released Threads, they'd also released there was a panel of scientists afterwards talking about it, and they released an accompanying documentary. I think the next 8 days or something, I believe. Yeah. So there was a few releases around.
It's on YouTube actually. I saw it. The intro, like
it's got Carl Sagan in it, I believe.
Yeah, it was tonight on BBC One. Yeah. The film that was finally being shown to the British public. Yeah, a bit like that. Yeah, it was cool seeing it. Yeah,
it was, and I think, I mean, look, let me just say your thoughts of it. Do you think it still holds up today, right?
Yeah, it definitely does hold up today. I'd say because I wish I saw this before I saw Threads, because I think Threads just takes it and then takes it to a whole other level and makes it's more impactful.
I think obviously Threads is probably the color, but then the exploration of nuclear winter, I think, is what.
I guess because it is in color, and then it's more graphic in certain ways too. So, and it gave you that sickly feeling. Then I found this because this kind of film that's a documentary, you still view it as like a factual kind of thing. Where Threads really pulls at your heartstrings more, I guess.
I think what Threads does is it's the fact that it starts off for the first 45 minutes as some sort of humdrum kitchen sink drama.
Yeah.
And then the bomb comes in and fucking throws it. Like you've sort of got attached to these characters and, oh shit, they're gone.
Yeah, it is like that.
It catches you off guard a lot more than this. This is kind of like, you kind of know what's coming with this one, don't you?
Yeah, and I think too, in the aftermath, it really shows like, the gore and the sickness, and then the hospital scenes, you're seeing like, people screaming and the close-ups and the blood and stuff. Like, I found it, it's a lot more...
But funny enough, I kind of disagree on the hospital scenes there, because I feel like the hospital scenes are more realistic in this one than
interesting. Yeah,
I get with the graphicness to it, but the way that people are walking to the hospital, I don't believe that would happen. Most people wouldn't even get to the hospital. There would be that, as I said, that filtering process. So I feel like this is more true to that.
That makes sense. Yeah,
in the war game, and it talks about, it mentions the doctor talking about he's actually filtering people who can be saved and who can be so. Yeah, there's a couple of things, but I guess Threads in its own right probably does that for dramatic effect too.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's meant to be a film as opposed to, this was more like a pseudo documentary, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
So it's trying to be more, like, let's say journalistic in a way, but this was more like, as you said, more dramatic. But I was thinking one not say criticism of him himself, Peter. I guess it is in a way because he's like so stubborn and headstrong in that way, and was pushing against certain things and went beyond the scopes in certain aspects. He didn't get his message out. The film got suppressed, so then he kind of defeated the whole purpose of making the film.
Yeah, he probably could have read. He probably could have read How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Exactly. Where Hines did
Barry Hines
and Michael
Mick Jackson.
Mick Jackson, Mick Jackson. Yeah, they were smarter about it and they got the message out there. So,
but do you think the war game possibly helped in that sense, where they're going through this and it kind of paved the way? It crawled so they
no, it definitely did. But I'm just saying, like, because I think some of these other films had the same issue where he couldn't get the message out that he wanted to portray because he was so pushing the agenda to the point where you get to the network, you got to get with people on their right side, where he's very stubborn, he's set in his ways.
It was black and white.
Black and white, yeah. He's cutting off his nose by his face a bit, like in certain aspects.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean I don't take away anything because I think what he's made is amazing.
But I appreciate he's got his morals.
I appreciate that, but but saying that the whole point, the message behind this is to get it out there to the public and warn them and show how like stupid the whole thing was, how unprepared they were. But then it didn't get out, so then it kind of didn't have that impact that he wanted it to have. So where with Threads it got out, and same with the day after as well. Even though it's a lot more milk tone version of Threads and the war game, but it did its message because it got through to Reagan. He saw it, and then it changed his view on nuclear holocaust and stuff. Basically,
that's a good point.
Yeah. But as a pure piece of art and cinematography, it's amazing, and I recommend anyone watch it.
Yeah, definitely. This definitely still holds up today.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
More so, and it's a very important watch. And I'd say, like, if I've heard a lot of people have listened to the Threads episode say, "Look, I'm glad you did it because I don't actually ever want to watch Threads." I think you could handle this one.
Yeah. And
this one would be.
It's only 45 minutes too. It's not a long watch either.
Yeah,
so.
I really say I would really recommend this one for you over Threads if that's you're in that way of thinking. I think it is still really relevant, sadly, today because of as I say, we got more nuclear states, more chance of a mistake happening. We're 89 seconds to midnight. We've got AI that introduces new risks, the false alarms, accidental launches.
I think, too, because he's such a visionary and ahead of his time with the way he films stuff, it doesn't feel as dated as it would other films from that time period either, does it?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, look, even now, we're looking at Britain as of a couple of days ago. Keir Starmer has actually initiated a strategic defence review. This has actually been a year in the making, and it's aimed at shifting the British military towards war fighting readiness.
Okay.
And this is in direct response to, I guess, the US pulling away from NATO slightly with some of the rhetoric coming out of Trumpy.
Yeah.
But a lot of NATO states, particularly Britain, now realise that shit, we've got to step up because
we can't just rely on them.
We can't rely on them anymore. But nuclear deterrence is basically the bedrock of this. I think they spent £15 billion on actually upgrading their Trident 2 missiles, so the submarine missiles. They spent £15 billion on that. But the words war fighting readiness is like, you're like, fucking hell, like it's, I guess it is deterrent, right? And so they're not backing down from the reliance on nuclear weapons.
Yeah. So we've seen recently in Australia, like, what was it, like two years ago, where our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese signed that thing with Joe Biden. I think the UK was involved too.
August,
yeah. The nuclear submarines thing was going to cost us like 30, 40...
nuclear powered submarines.
Be 40 or 50 billion dollars, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if China decides to invade us in 20 years' time, we won't be ready. But
it creates jobs.
Yeah, jobs, yeah. But in 30 years' time, watch out, China.
Yeah, I'd be coming now.
Yeah, we're a bit like Britain too, where unfortunately, whatever the US says jump, we say how high, basically, isn't it?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
No, it just shows that it's still relevant now, still at the forefront of people's, it should be at the forefront, of people's thinking, and you should always be prepared, I guess, for it.
Yeah, you should always be prepared, but unfortunately, a lot of people just don't want to
think about it. Yeah,
they don't want to think about it. And as I say, I can understand that. So, in many ways, well, in a lot of ways, we are on the brink of it. It feels like,
Yeah, well, what's the doomsday clock at now?
89 seconds to midnight.
There you go. So, it's a bit freaky, isn't it?
I mean, we talk about the we talk about the near misses that happen. These are the ones we know about. I mean, what about the ones we don't know about?
Yeah, the non-declassified ones. Yeah,
it's
or especially too when you've got Putin, Trump,
We've got Pakistan, India, two nuclear states at war with each other.
They're bloody, they've been on tit for tat recently as well, and then obviously North Korea, and then now you're saying Iran's almost at that point too, and especially with the way stuff's going on in Gaza as well. You just never know. Like, it's one little hair trigger here or there could change the whole course of history.
Yeah, there's that saying. It's that whole thing of more nuclear states equals more chance.
More likely it's going to happen, right?
Yeah. By mistake, and that's the scariest thing. Just it's happening by mistake,
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anything else you want to add to the episode?
Well, no, we'll end it there on that positive note.
No, yeah. Well, while we're getting our nuclear bunks all ready, what can the viewers expect on next week's episode?
So they can expect we're going back to John Carpenter now on a movie called They Live.
Oh, interesting. There we go.
Interesting. It kind of links slightly to the war game of what we were talking about with Peter Watkins in the terms of we mentioned the monoform. John Carpenter's perhaps not as subtle as Peter Watkins here, but we're seeing things of media not silencing, but media now controlling. So we see it's a very interesting take on Reagan's America. I think I saw this 10 years ago, and I loved it. It's definitely a B movie, but definitely full of some great quotes.
I mean, it's got Roddy Rowdy Piper in it, so it's got to be great.
I'll be expecting some wrestling references, like your 28 Days Later one.
Oh, absolutely. I'll definitely be popping in some good some of his promo work. Yeah, and as always, guys, hit us up on our Instagram and Tumblr page, which is at Dystopedia Pod. You can send us an email at info@dystopediapodcast.com. Follow us on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell, all those great things, and we'll catch you next week, guys.
See you guys.